What's happening, everybody? All right, so in this video, this is going to be part one, by the way, of a two-part video series about modifying your Hellcat. Main reason why I wanted to put this together is, well, Hellcat's in its 5th year of production. A lot of these cars are now coming up on the used market. Guys are getting close to their ending of their warranty period. They're starting to get rid of them. Lease cars are starting to get turned in, and so because of that, a lot of the Hellcats are showing up on dealer lots, and a lot of new Hellcat owners are out there. First video I'm going to do is basically, I'm going to give you guys kind of your, kind of a generic Hellcat hot rodder starter kit. What to expect from the car stock and some mild enhancements that you can throw at the car to get a little bit more out of the car, maybe make it a little bit more fun to drive. In part two, I'm going to go a little bit more in depth with pulleys, fuel systems, and some other modifications that will really start to make power with these things. But again, for the first video, we're just going to go with the basics. So, what do you need to have for your car if you want to start throwing more power at it, or for you guys that want to take the car to the drag strip? Well, first and foremost, you're going to need to get a drive shaft. The stock drive shaft really is the fusible link, so to speak, in the drivetrain. Engine's bomb-proof, transmission's proven itself to handle well over 1,100 horsepower. The problem is that drive shaft. So that's going to be something you're going to need to address. DSS makes a very good drive shaft. It's what I've got on my car, and a lot of guys run them and don't have any issues with them. The latest DSS drive shafts. As far as other brands, I don't know. I'm not getting paid to endorse anybody's product here, but QA1 is good. Stick with the name brands that are sold by the major retailers online, so to speak. The guys that support this platform, buy from them. I don't recommend going too far astray from that. Now, secondly, what about traction? Well, first of all, you're going to need to get yourself a drag radial if you're going to take this thing to the drag strip. The stock tires are useless, and although they're a lot of fun on the street, getting this thing down the drag strip, even on a prepared drag strip with plenty of VHT, is not going to be, it's just not going to be in the cards for you. Sorry, you're going to have to run a different tire on the car. I am running a drag pack setup on mine, but you don't necessarily need that. A good set of Nitto Tri-5 Rs in the stock size on the stock wheels will do just fine, and it'll help you have a little bit more fun with the car, at least for no other reason that it will move once you put your foot into it a little bit. So what about just the rest of the bolt-on type parts? What works and what doesn't? Well, for starters, we got to know what the car is going to make to the rear wheels in terms of horsepower, so that we have at least a baseline to talk about. And on a Mustang dyno, which is what I will be referencing when I am talking about dyno numbers, I'm referencing corrected, SAE corrected Mustang dyno numbers. Typically, a healthy Hellcat will put down somewhere around 595. And that's kind of the going horsepower rate, so to speak, for Hellcat. Somewhere between 585 and 595 on a load-bearing Mustang dyno. Now, what about the different things that you can put on the car, like cold airs and throttle bodies, tunes, things like that? Well, let's start off with that cold air intake. Everybody wants to jump all over the cold air intake thing. First and foremost, if you are buying an open element, which is really what I'm talking about, not a cold air intake, just an open element intake for your Hellcat, know that you're not going to get any real power out of that, nor will you get any real power out of any of the other systems that are out there. The stock setup is very good. And to that point, run the stock air filter. Run the one that is sold by Mopar. That K&N is not going to get you anything for your Hellcat. Believe me when I tell you, seen it on the dyno, and I've seen it at the drag strip. In fact, it's actually could possibly hurt the performance of the car. Just a tiny bit, not much. The stock air filter flows like you would not believe. But getting back to that cold air intake or open element intake, if you buy one, just buy it for the sound. Don't buy it because you're expecting to get power out of it. Buy it because you want to hear that supercharger wailing all of the time. It is intoxicating to drive a car with one of those types of systems where you just are constantly being fed this awesome supercharger whine. But again, don't buy that thing expecting to get any horsepower out of it. Throttle bodies. Throttle bodies will typically pick up, and this is, I'm referencing the Fastman True ported throttle body here. That picks up around between 5 and 8 horsepower and say 8 to 10 pound-feet of torque across the board. Again, not a huge increase, but think of that throttle body as a supporting modification, possibly for some mods that you do down the line, and it'll actually give it a little bit better throttle response just the way it sits already. Now, aside from those, which don't usually need a tune, maybe the throttle body might for some cars. One thing to remember with these cars is that Dodge was constantly updating operating systems. Some operating systems are a little bit more finicky about certain modifications than others. Just know that typically the throttle body doesn't require a tune. But what about the tuning? And what about other modifications that you can make to the car that would basically work with the tune to make more power? Well, a lot of guys have asked me the question about catalytic converter deletes for these cars. And to be honest with you guys, if you're running more or less stock power or tuned, you really don't need to remove your stock catalytic converters. They flow plenty to support deep mid 10-second passes. Believe me when I tell you, my car is stock and it's run a best of a 1047 and averages in the 1060s in decent air. Still has the stock catalytic converters on it, so yeah, they flow just fine. There's, again, no real gain on the dyno and no gain at the drag strip by using a catalytic converter delete pipe. And I know that there are some guys that say, oh, well, I put this certain pipe on there and it picked up X number of horsepower. Look, guys, I'm giving you real world experience here, not how somebody was able to finagle some dyno numbers. So again, no real change, no real difference on either the dyno or the drag strip. And this is on multiple cars, on multiple trips to the drag strip. But that's, I just want to leave it at that. Part 2, I'll get into a little bit more about exhaust systems, but leave the exhaust system stock if you're going to stay with more or less, stock or tuned stock power. And getting into the tune, if you're going to get a tune on these cars, remember that you do need to get that stock ECU unlocked. You're going to have to send it off to HP tuners. Or Diablo, whoever's going to actually physically unlock that computer, or you can buy a computer that is already unlocked from the factory. Just know this: if you are worried about your warranty, there are some of the things that I'm telling you will void parts of your warranty. So your drive shaft will void potentially your drive train warranty, but not necessarily anything to do with the engine per se. And if you tune your car, or even typically if you unlock it, you shouldn't have a problem. But the minute you start tuning the car, there is a strong chance that you could void the warranty there. Again, keep that kind of thought pretty prevalent in your mind when you start going down the road with these cars, because should you have a problem or a failure, they are not cheap to fix. So again, that out of the way, what about tuning? So typically tuning, you're going to pick up somewhere around 30 to 40 horsepower to the rear wheels with these cars. They're already very stout from the factory, but with stock catalytic converters, you'll pick up somewhere around 30 horsepower, 30 to 35 horsepower to the rear wheels. And although that doesn't seem like a whole lot, keep in mind that you're also going to need to have your transmission tuned, and that's really where the difference lies. Regardless of the power that the car picks up with the tune, it is not uncommon for these cars to pick up a couple of tenths in the quarter mile and a couple of mile per hour on the big end. So keep that in the back of your mind, all the same while with the transmission tune making the car a bit more lively to drive. So what all is entailed with that? Well, you've got the computer unlocked plus the credits if you're using HP tuners. to tune the car, plus the tune itself. It's not an inexpensive proposition. But in saying that, I will also add this. Make sure that you are using a tuner that speaks Mopar. Mopars are different than tuning Chevrolets or Fords, and you need to make sure that the tuner that you choose is somebody that does come highly recommended from the Mopar community. I am affiliated with Pikes Performance Tunes in Houston, Texas, so I will always recommend Alex and the crew over at Pikes Performance. However, there are other tuners out there. Again, stick with the ones that are recommended by the Mopar community, and you will probably be okay. Deviate from that at your own risk. So, aside from that, what else do you need, basically, to wrap up your generic Hellcat hobby kit? Well, that's pretty much it. Aside from, again, if you wanted to go with a drag race wheel and tire setup like I'm running for strictly drag racing use, always a good idea. Pick up about 1/10 or so there as well. And again, I do have to mention that my car has run a best of a 1047 and best mile an hour, about 130 miles an hour, and it's stock. It's a pretty stout example of what one of these cars can do. So again, it's not to say that you can't do that. It's just that, I live down here in Houston where when the DA is good, it's real good. So taking advantage of a little bit of that Mother Nature mod doesn't hurt either. So hopefully that helps you out. In part 2, we're going to be going over pulleys, fuel systems, things of that nature, and what to do to get big horsepower out of these Hellcats. So that's a wrap on this one. Y'all have a great one. We'll catch you on the next one. Adios.